Good evening, everybody. We're just letting everybody in, making sure we're giving a chance for everybody to join us tonight, but we're excited that you're taking the time out of your evening to join us tonight for this very important topic. All right, we're going to go ahead and get this started. We appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. I'm Supervisor Zach Friend. It's a great honor to be seeing you again virtually, unfortunately, as you know, as we continue to deal with these issues with the COVID, but we appreciate that you're taking the time to join us tonight. We've got a very important program. In fact, not only have we had challenges across the state in the last few weeks regarding fire, but we've had some really close calls even in our own community again in the last couple of weeks. And we just recognize how important it is that each one of us learn all the key elements for preparation, evacuation, and more, which we will cover a number of these things tonight. But what we also want to do is ensure that about half of the time is dedicated to your questions, because that's really how we've got a handful of remarkable experts on here with Dave and Patty, and then you've got a second set, as in me, of secondary experts that are happy to answer whatever questions we can. But this is really your opportunity once they do their presentation, which would take about half the time tonight, to really get whatever questions you want. And Dave will go over kind of some of the logistics of it. But for those who aren't familiar, he is the director, and he'll do a more in-depth introduction. But the Santa Cruz County Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience, or as we know as OR3, and as you may know, the Board of Supervisors created this new team in order to address a number of issues, both proactively and retroactively. We are in a very unique community in our county in the sense that there isn't a disaster that doesn't seem to touch us, from earthquakes and floods to fires to a number of other issues. And so with limited ingress and egress components and some of the disasters that have just played out in the last few years, from the devastating floods of 16 and 17 and the just absolutely devastating fires of just a couple of years ago, we thought it made sense to have people dedicated just to these elements. From not just the preparation side and the resilience side, but also the recovery side, as we've had to see so much so, both from the storm damage and fire damage lately. So I got to say, I really do appreciate, Dave, you taking the time, Patty, you taking the time to reach out to our district and our community and be so accessible. And I'm going to hand this over to you to kick this evening off.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. Look forward to the conversation and sharing some of the good information that we have to better prepare you ahead of an event and during or after an event. So as the Supervisor said, I'm the director of OR3, and a lot of folks forget the order or the number of the R's, but really our office manages the emergency functions at the county, so disaster and emergency preparedness and response. And then we're deeply embedded in supporting the recovery for the CZU fire families, and thinking about the notion of resilience, to build more resilience in our community, not only from the climate change perspective, but from my colleague, and I'll let her introduce herself, Patty, on the wildfire side. So Patty, I'll let you introduce yourself and we can jump right in.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Supervisor. So my name is Patty Ciesla, and I'm the new Wildfire Resilience Program Manager at OR3. I come to Santa Cruz County by way of Santa Clara County, where I served as the Executive Director of the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council. And I was responsible for a number of programs and projects there, including being a project manager for the Highway 17 shaded fuel break that created more defensible space along the highway between Summit and Los Gatos. And then shortly after that project completed, I went to Sacramento and served for about a year as the Executive Director of the California Fire Safe Council, which is a grant-making organization, and also working on developing capacity for other county-level organizations to be more effective in preparing their communities for wildfire. So I'm delighted to be working in my home county now in Santa Cruz, and I live up in the mountains and have been evacuated several times, including for both the Bear and, of course, the CZU fire. And so I'm happy to share my knowledge and experience with you guys, and hopes that it can help you be better prepared for a wildfire.
Thanks, Patty. So just as a reminder, we are recording tonight so that if community members that you know weren't able to join us, we will post the recording and presentation on our OR3 website. And I'll make sure to get that to the supervisor's office so that he can let folks know how to access the recording. As the supervisor mentioned, we'll have a Q&A section at the end. It looks like everybody is here via a computer versus calling in. So you'll be able to use the raise hand function. We'll unmute you or give you permission to unmute, and then you can go ahead and ask your questions once we get to that portion. So without further hesitation, we'll get started. I'll share my screen and we can discuss some of the topics around wildfire resilience and preparedness that we had. And so let me get this up and running, and then if everybody can see that. We're going to go through kind of the notion of ready, set, go, talking about home hardening and defensible space, and then preparation for evacuation, and then what do we do if there's a disaster that's imminent and we're asking you to evacuate, and what are the resources for communication, and what are the things you can do to be ready for that. And then we'll talk briefly about some of the other resilience efforts that we're doing in OR3, and then we'll open up for questions. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Patty, and she's going to just let me know, and I'll advance slides as we go.
Great. Thank you, Dave. So we're going to start off with the topic of home hardening. There's a lot of new research that's come out regarding how homes ignite in wildfires, and it's not what many people think. Most of the time when you think of wildfires, you think of a big wall of flames. But most homes are actually ignited by embers. And so you might think about where embers could land, blowing in on the wind, on your home or on things next to your home. So I think that's an important concept for many people to really understand with embers, is if you imagine going out to your house with a Weber kettle full of red hot charcoal and pulling it at your house, what would happen? Because that's kind of what embers are like in a wildfire, is burning charcoal. Next slide. Smaller embers behave like leaves or needles, whether it's redwood, Doug fir, pine, whatever kind of conifer you might have in your neighborhood. And the leaves that come out of the trees in your neighborhood, the wind currents that you have around your home are going to treat embers just like leaves and needles. And so they're going to accumulate where you already see leaves and needles on your property. So in your gutters, along the edges of your house, next to the steps, in the gullies and valleys on your roof, piling up against your fence. So you might want to think about, in getting your home ready for wildfire, is where would embers go and what does it look like there? Because hardening your home against embers requires you to think about the wind and the currents that bring the embers to you. Next slide. So quickly, I'll just go through a little bit about this for the roof. Obviously, if you have a shake shingle roof, that's going to be one of your highest priorities, is to replace a wood roof. Most people have upgraded their roofs since the wildfire. Building codes have been enacted and have Class A roofs. But if you don't have a Class A roof, that should be a priority, because that's where most of the embers are going to land. And you certainly don't want your roof to be on fire. They'll also, of course, cascade down off your roof and into your rain gutters if you have them. And of course, during wildfire season in the Santa Cruz Mountains, this is also when our trees start to shed leaves, kind of like the early autumn that we get. And so your gutters are often full of leaves and needles. And so the embers are going to land in there and set all that stuff on fire. So you want to look at maybe either keeping them scrupulously clean, getting up either on your roof or on a ladder and clean your gutters so that they can't be ignited. What's in them can't be ignited. And then take a good look at the edge, the eave of your house where the gutters attach, and then also the side eaves. You want to look and see, do you have vents under your eaves? What's the situation up there? If embers are landing on your house, are they going to get blown into your attic? So if you don't have fine mesh screen on your eave vents, you want to replace the screening that you have with 16-inch mesh, or have possibly you can buy some of these wildfire resistant vents and replace the vents with those. Your siding, of course, goes down most of the way or all of the way to the ground. And if it's wood siding, that's a big vulnerability for you, because the embers are going to accumulate at the base of your house, at the bottom of your walls. So you might think, if you've got wood siding, you might think about putting a skirt of non-combustible siding around the bottom of your home if you can't afford to replace all the siding, at least the bottom 3 feet, with metal or stucco or stone, something that can't be ignited. Windows and window frames, sometimes on older homes you get gaps, places where embers can hit the side of your building and then collect in little nooks and crannies. And of course, the last thing you want is for the glass to get broken and the wooden frame around your window to catch on fire, because that would bring the fire right into your home. Decks are a big consideration because most of us have them. If we live up in the mountains on a slope, most homes have at least one deck, and they're usually made out of redwood. So you want to keep your deck super clean. At least once a year, get in there and clean all the nooks and crannies in your deck, so that you don't have fine pine needles or whatever stuck in the spaces between your deck boards. It's helpful if you can armor the first 2 feet right next to your house on top of your deck. You can put ceramic tile there so that if embers land on that edge of your deck right next to your house, they don't ignite your deck and the side of the house. You also want to look at outbuildings, including your garage and sheds, to see what is attached to your home, because you want to apply the same principles of hardening your home to anything that's attached to it. So you want to make sure your garage door seals tightly, that embers can't blow in under the bottom or along the sides. And if that's an issue where you can get leaves in your garage, you want to look at weather stripping and doing things to prevent that from happening, so that when a wildfire arrives and you've got embers blowing around, you can shut your garage door and keep them out. Also, another thing to keep in mind is sometimes if you've got sheds that are near your building, a lot of times those don't have Class A roofs. The roof decking and whatever you've got to keep the rain out of your shed may not actually be fire resistant. So take a look at that. Fences are a really important consideration because they're often attached to our homes and they can act like wicks. And what you don't want is for the fence to catch on fire and bring the fire right up underneath your eave and right up against the siding of your home. So we recommend that you replace, if you've got a wooden fence that attaches to your house, replace the first 5 feet of that fence with something non-combustible like metal or stucco or stone. If you've got a gate right along the side of your house, have that be a metal gate. And then that way there's an interruption between the fence and your house. The other thing is clutter. A lot of people don't really think about the things that they own as being a problem for wildfire, but your garbage can, your recycling can, if you leave those lids open, embers can get in there and set whatever is in those cans on fire. And if they're right up next to your house, your garage, that's kind of not a good thing. Also, if you've got cardboard boxes or cute little wicker knickknacks in your garden right up against your house, things that you're storing underneath the eave to keep them from getting damaged in the rain, can end up being little ember traps right next to your house. So you want to look at what you keep stored around your house in the summertime And if you put firewood up on your porch or your deck or whatever for heating in the winter, that should all be removed in the summertime. Don't store firewood near your home in the summertime. So a quick run through on that. Next slide. We're going to get into the topic of defensible space, which is not so much about the structure, but about the vegetation. So the big concept that I want you to take away is that if you own the fuel, you own the fire. So whatever the vegetation around your property looks like, that's the fuel that could help set your home on fire. And nobody is going to come onto your property and cut that away for you. It's 100% your responsibility to maintain your defensible space. So many of us really love the integration of our home into the wildland, and the birds and the smells and the beauty of vegetation around our home. But it could be the thing that destroys everything we own. So keep that in mind. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the term defensible. Defensible space was coined by the fire service to imply that when they get to your home, they can defend it. That the space around your home is something that firefighters can go into and engage and help fight the fire and prevent your home from catching on fire or put it out if it's already burning. And it's really about firefighter safety from that perspective. Can they come in to your home? Can they drive up your driveway, turn around and park? Can they get out? Can they open the doors and get out on a hard surface that's not on fire or not right next to something on fire? Can they deploy their hoses? Can they stand there in the heat of the wildfire and do their job as firefighters? It doesn't mean, of course, that they will arrive in massive wildfires where we have way more flame than we have firefighters. They have to pick and choose which properties they're going to go to. Sometimes it's a big landscape level strategic decision made by chiefs, and sometimes it's a local decision made by the engine captain. And so what you want for defensible space is a property that is inviting to firefighters, and they look at it and they go, yeah, we can go there and we can take a stand against a wildfire here because we're not in danger. Okay, we're going to go through a couple principles about some of the things that you'll need to attend to in preparing your defensible space. So fuel is a term that is used to describe the vegetation that can burn, and of course anything else like fencing, as we described, that can burn. And so managing the fuel in preparing your defensible space is really about trying to manage the flame length if a wildfire comes into your yard. You want to break up the vegetation so that there's spaces between the trees and shrubs, because continuous or contiguous fuels will carry the fire. It will just keep going without pausing. And large flames near your house, that's a suboptimal situation. It's not what you want. It's not survivable. Your home is going to catch on fire if your vegetation goes right up to your house, and it carries the flame to it. Next slide. Another aspect of managing the fuel is managing the heat that is generated right next to your home. So you might have a gap between your home and the vegetation. Excuse me. But if what you've got in terms of vegetation is very dense and very packed with a lot of branches and a lot of leaves, it's going to generate a lot of heat when it's burning. And if you've got windows exposed to that, then they can actually break from the heat. And then of course that just allows the fire to go right inside your house. So you want to keep in mind that defensible space in many ways is about reducing the total amount of biomass, so that you have shorter flames and less intense heat. One of the things that fire scientists talk about is the energy release component of vegetation, which is kind of how many BTUs are there and available to start burning. So really big redwood trees with their dense, not very flammable bark are really hard to light on fire, as are the trunks of oak trees and other trees. Because they're so large, you could stand there with a flamethrower and not light those big trees on fire if you're just pointing the flame at the trunk. But it's the diameter, it's the smaller diameter twigs and branches and leaves that will ignite instantaneously. And once those are burning, then they can start burning the medium-sized stuff. And that's where all your heat comes from. Okay, next slide.
So I was going to jump in real quick and share. This is an image of a home in White House Canyon on the north coast. That it's a little valley just before you get to Costa Noa, for those that know the north coast. And many of the homes in this valley were lost during the CZU fire. This particular home had a great defensible space, and I just took a couple pictures because I thought it was remarkable that most of his neighbors lost their home, but his survived. So you can see the siding doesn't go all the way down to the ground. That he had pea gravel within the first 5 to 7 feet or 10 feet. You can see the singed black trunk of a redwood tree that came very close to the house. And then, as he described, he'd spent decades managing the fuel around his home. So doing all the things that Patty shared. So I just wanted to share this real world example from the CZU. And so that's really that zone 0, where you don't have any combustible material and the right balance of hardscape to prevent the fires from reaching the edge of your home or the base of the home. And then I'll let Patty run through some of the other defensible space stuff, and we'll get to questions here rather quickly.
Yeah, I really love those images, Dave. Let's go back just one slide real quickly. I have one comment. Most of us have grown up with landscape foundation plantings around our homes. Many suburban homes, actually, when they were built, there was a requirement that plants were put around the foundation of the home. And so most of us, if we haven't done the 0 zone treatment, we have some really heartbreaking things that we need to do to remove vegetation that we may love dearly in that 0 to 5 foot zone. So this is a new recommendation and soon to be a requirement for new construction, that you'll have a non-combustible zone around your house. Most of us don't have that, and most of us have a lot of work to do to create it. Next slide. I want to talk about the 5 to 30 foot zone, what we call the lean, clean, and green zone. This is your garden. And in this area, maintenance is going to be your friend. You don't want to let leaves, twigs, branches, pine needles, whatever, accumulate in your garden. Or if you have dead plants, sometimes your plants age out and you have a little patch of dead stuff. You want succulent, well-hydrated plants in this area, and you want spacing between your plants. You can see that there's a couple of succulent species, including aloe and maybe some yucca or bear grass, stuff that has a high moisture content, especially in the center of the plant. And so these are ideal for the area around your garden. You can also see that the shrubs are pruned up kind of at the base. There's no dead wood in those shrubs. And so there's nothing really there to catch on fire. And so that's a fire-safe garden area. So within 30 feet of your home, you want to think about those principles. You don't have to pick succulent plants, but what you do want to avoid is things like rosemary, lavender, sage, things that have really fine twigs and aromatic oils. You can plant those more than 30 feet from your house. But if you've got a lot of that kind of stuff near your house, or juniper, something like that, you want to get that out of there. Also, if there's any trees in that 30 foot zone, trees are allowed in the 30 foot zone, but you want to take the bottom branches off of the trees and try and limit the number of shrubs that are under them. This slide is regarding the more extended 30 to 100 foot zone. And if you're on a slope out as much as 200 feet, depending upon how steep the grade is. You don't need to go 200 feet in all directions. 100 feet is really sufficient in most circumstances to keep that high intensity heat and long flame lengths away from your house. Going more than 100 feet doesn't really buy you anything, and you're better off putting your energy in hardening your home than going beyond 100 feet. So in this area, you just want to think about adding air, if you will, as you remove the vegetation and space things out. You've got gaps between the trees and the shrubs, and you're eliminating the ladder fuels under your trees so that you don't have a crown fire in your yard. Yeah, so this slide, if you want to look at the picture on the left, the ladder fuel is surface matter. So the duff, the leaves, the twigs, the branches, the little shrubs, the blackberries and the poison oak and the coffee berry and the toyon and the other plants that we have in our natural environment underneath the trees, that's all combustible. And so if you get a fire underneath the trees and you've got branches coming down to the ground, that stuff can climb up into the canopy of the tree and create a crown fire, which is really dangerous. It makes firefighters leave. And it can set things on fire that are pretty far away. So crown fires are not good. And what you want to try and do is take the branches off the bottom of the tree. It's called skirting them up. And remove the shrubs that are underneath your trees. And once you've created that gap between the ground and the bottom branches, it makes it really hard for the flames to get tall enough to catch the tree on fire. And if it does singe the tree, it's not likely to get all the way up to the top. It might just char it or singe it a little bit, but it's not the same thing as a crown fire. And many trees can survive that kind of low intensity surface fire. A lot of really, really helpful information has been put together by the Institute for Business and Home Safety. This is a research organization funded by the insurance industry. And they have I don't know if it's like a 30-page guide on preparing your home for wildfire. I highly recommend that you go and download this guide. It's specific to California. So it has some really good guidance for us for our climate and our vegetation type. You can get it off the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County's website. You can see the link there, and we'll make sure that you can get this link and easily click to go and get that guide. Briefly, Firewise is it's a program of the National Fire Protection Association. It's an amazing organization and process that you go through with your neighbors. You collectively get together to prepare your community for wildfire. It includes doing a risk assessment, looking at all the things in your community that make you vulnerable, things like your roads, the distance of houses to each other, whether you've got vacant lots that are not being managed or you're next to open space. It looks at things like your signage, your road network, your vulnerability if the power goes out to get communications. You know, it brings you all together to reduce your risks. So the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County has a volunteer coordinator that is helping coach communities to become Firewise recognized. So if you're interested in this for your community, I highly recommend it. You can go to the Fire Safe Council website and click on the Contact Us button and fill out a quick form that will go to Lynn Sestak, who is the Firewise coordinator, and she will reach out to you and help you get started on this program. Right now, we have 31 total communities in Santa Cruz County that are FireWise recognized, and I think we're probably going to hit 50 by the end of 2023, I would think. Good. Evacuation readiness.
Yeah.
So
I'll take over from here.
Okay.
On this one, just so that folks know, the county issues an evacuation warning through our reverse 911 system, but most of what we will try to achieve is early evacuation notice. But obviously, we can't always assure community that we're going to be able to do that depending on the conditions. So making sure that you're prepared for evacuation readiness, knowing your route, being prepared is going to be critical. So that's not only knowing what you need to do for you, yourself, your family, your fur children, but also knowing what your neighbors are going to be doing. And if you aren't home, if there's something that needs to get done. I've dealt very much with folks that were underinsured with respect to fire. So making sure your insurance is up to where you feel like it needs to be is critical in your preparation, but also making sure you have all the requisite documentation will help. And then I'll talk a little bit about red flag and alert warning stuff as well. So as I said, our NetCom, our reverse 911 system is through what's called Code Red. And I'll have a slide that shows a little bit about how to register for Code Red if you haven't done so already. But the evacuation management tool that we use is called Zone Haven. So the whole county is divided up into little zones, and we will evacuate based on those geographic areas depending on the fire. So making sure you're familiar with that website where you can take a look if a fire has started and it's not near you, you can track. And we will put zones into warnings and then orders to move people out. And then making sure you have the right stuff, a go bag, your escape route, and to evacuate early, or certainly when you're ordered to do so. So as Patty said, there's a ton of resources out there. Patty is herself an amazing resource for us as a county and community, but the Fire Safe Council is an amazing organization of which Patty's a board member, and we work closely with them. As she said, they work on the FireWise side of things as well as other outreach and education opportunities. Our Santa Cruz County Fire Department is working to build resilience and address these issues, as well as Central Fire as one of the other primary fire protection agencies for the 2nd District. Lastly, or near the end here, as a reminder, you can go to the www.scr911.org to register for Code Red. There's the link to Zone Haven so that you can know your zone. The other thing I want to let folks know about from the alert and warning standpoint is we are introducing the ability to use NOAA weather radios. This is a new tool for us. There's only a handful of places in the whole state that are using this tool right now, so we're excited to be able to use it if need be, hopefully not. But it means what you do is you purchase a weather radio with that little logo in the slide here, and we will broadcast through that radio if there's a disaster, a wildfire that you need to evacuate for. The nice thing is most of those radios have battery backup. So if the power is out, it's one of the ways in which we can communicate with you. In addition to organizations like CERT and our ARES team that also have amateur radios, the NOAA weather radio is an easy, relatively low-cost tool for folks. And then the Resource Conservation District is doing great fuel reduction work, and we've talked about some of those other organizations. Lastly, and I'll stop here quickly, is we're just really trying to build our capacity with Patty's leadership and the resources that are coming in from grants. So we've hopefully going to land a $380,000 grant from the California Fire Safe Council to support evacuation preparedness, readiness, and planning. So we're excited to hopefully hear officially in the next week or two on that, but we've got a provisional approval that we just have to close the loop on a few things. We're trying to get money from FEMA to do some big fuel reduction work along major evacuation routes. We've added 3 new alert wildfire cameras to our county to give us better advanced warning. We used a couple of those new cameras with the spot fire, small fires that happened in the mountains over the last few weeks. And then we're really trying to update our climate action and adaptation plan and build more climate resilience knowledge and planning so that we can be better prepared for all of climate change's impacts. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I know we went a little bit over the halfway point, but happy to open it up to questions as folks may have. And so thank you, Kathy, for raising your hand. And as a reminder, everybody should know the drill, but at the bottom of the screen, there's that little raise hand function. You can go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question. So I'm going to ask Kathy to unmute, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. I knew nothing about fire prevention, but I have a good friend that used to be a fire marshal and head of CAL FIRE, and he's a neighbor at the coast. And we started a fire prevention committee at our HOA. And we took a lot of the precautions, but I learned some nuggets today. So I really appreciate that, like the Defensible Space group. I didn't know about that. So I will definitely get us involved. But we've taken a lot of action, getting rid of the junipers, talking to all the HOA people into doing it. So we've done a lot on our own. We have 183 homes between a condominium and our homes. But in between, there's a state park. And as we've had the CAL FIRE and fire marshals, they say it's a very high fire hazard area because there's eucalyptus. They're very, as you know, oil-based. And so we've cleaned it up a couple of times on our own and paid for it, but strongly they suggested a shaded fuel break. And things have fallen apart because the crews, they don't have as many because, they're letting prisoners out and stuff. So they went from several crews to one. So a lot of the stuff we planned on isn't going to happen. So my question to you is, State Park says they don't have the budget and they don't have the time to do it. What else can we do to get this fixed so that we are protected and don't have a fire hazard there, in your opinion?
Yeah, so a couple things. One of Patty's roles as the Wildfire Resilience Program Manager for the county is to build coordination between the different public and private landowners,
Okay.
and to track and secure more funding for projects. So, the most recent example I can share is the Resource Conservation District secured a grant to do some fuel management work along Graham Hill Road, including state parks lands. So what we want to do through Patty's leadership and through working with some of the partner organizations like the Resource Conservation District is to identify the menu that prioritized areas that we need to work along our urban and wildland interface areas, like the place that you're describing. So I think what we're going to try and do is start to build that project list and then try and be systematic and strategic about going after funding to address these places that you're describing that happen to be on state lands or other large landowners, whether those be public agencies or nonprofits.
Gotcha.
So certainly let us know about your neighborhood as an example. I will make sure to add our contact information. I failed to have that slide at the end. So I'll make sure to get that out to you all. And you can also go to our website and get our contact information, but happy to hear about that area and then we can follow up.
I really appreciate it. I'm so passionate about not only the homes, but the owls and the coyotes. And I mean, it's just so sad that we can prevent these fires and we don't. That's what's so sad to me in California. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kathy. And it looks like Emmy, you can unmute, I believe, Emmy.
Great. Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Again, just like as Kathy stated, I so appreciate this webinar that you are presenting. It's fabulous information. I wanted to speak specifically to our neighborhood concerns. I'm out in Corralitos. I live on Enos Lane, and there's dozens of neighbors here along with a student population at the Salesian School. And we have a situation, we've tried to address it with planning, and I was going to ask Zach if maybe we could get some traction on it. It happens to revolve around an unpermitted shipping container that's placed in an easement that's meant for an evacuation. And we basically had a perfect storm occur in the month of June where PG&E picked a day to place a new utility pole. It happened to be the last day of the Salesian school and they were having a special event. And so traffic was rerouted onto a kind of a subpar road called Molnar Lane. We had asked before if fire vehicles would even come down Molnar Lane and were told no. So obviously a concern. This is our direct evacuation route. We were basically landlocked. It was just that one day, but it just kind of shows you what could happen if in a perfect storm of events. I'd hate to see this turn into a small scale campfire. And I'd just love to perhaps, if it's appropriate, Zach, I don't know, contact Dave later to discuss some of the specific community concerns regarding this issue.
Well, I mean, I think it actually is even more appropriate to contact me and Allison, who's also on this, because we deal directly with the planning side and the code enforcement side. Dave does all these other amazing things, but we would be happy to help you out on a planning and code enforcement related issue. So feel free to just drop me a line directly. That's fine.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Dave, I see we actually have a question in the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. So the question in here, I'll just read it to folks. It says, my primary concern is how and who coordinates accurate evacuation information for those who live in areas served both by CAL FIRE and Central Fire. We who live in neighborhoods with only one road in and out want to leave the road open for fire vehicles. So that's a great question. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of the operational sequence of events and who does what. So in the event of a wildfire that is in that kind of general area that was described, a large scale wildfire will always be the purview of our CAL FIRE partners. But in terms of evacuation management, we quickly form a unified command system with our sheriff's department, because the sheriff's department is really charged with enforcing an evacuation order and maintaining security of the area evacuated. So the communication will always come through the reverse 911 system, through the social media channels for all of those agencies. And the first on scene may be Central Fire, but the evacuation management will come through Zonehaven, and the notifications of that evacuation will come through the reverse 911 system. They may come through that alert, weather radio, and then all of the different social media channels as well. So it's not so much which fire jurisdiction is responding first or in charge that will notify you of the evacuation, as much as you would look for one of the calls coming from those resources. The other thing I would say is, as an example, Central Fire just had a small 1 acre fire on North Rodeo Gulch at Soquel Drive. In that instance, they handled the fire with their engines because it was small enough. But in the event that we do a large scale evacuation of a whole zone, it will likely have exceeded the capacity of the Central Fire District, and we will be pulling in resources from CAL FIRE and other fire agencies in our area until more folks can come from out of the area to support. Another question said, this presentation is very good. I'd like to share it with neighbors. So what we do on our OR3 website, and maybe what I can do is try and multitask here in a second and just show you where it'll live on our website. And we'll try and get that up in the next day or two. And then you can go back, you can surf the web and find our website and find a link to both the video and the presentation. So what I'll do real quick is I'll share our screen, my screen again. So this is the landing page for the OR3 Officer Response Recovery and Resilience. And under the events tab, you can scroll down and there's a list of previous events. And actually a year ago tomorrow, we had a similar conversation with the 2nd District. So that information is all right here. And then this conversation that we've had tonight will live right underneath this previous event with a link to the video as well as the presentation. So under the landing page for OR3, you can go under the About and find the events and then find the link there. So hopefully that's helpful, and I will stop sharing. And Emmy, I think your hand is still up, but I think you're done. I think, unless there was another question you had. And I'm trying to see. It looks like I answered that one question in the queue, and I know it's 6:15 or a little after 6:15. So want to respect everybody's time. Supervisor, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to the conversation, or if other people have any questions, want to raise their hand, happy to stay on, or also happy to give everybody their evening back.
Thanks, Dave. I think we can close with this. And if you want, any one of you can just email me and I'll send you the link directly. And any of the things that were discussed tonight, we're happy to provide to you. Emmy, obviously, we look forward to hearing from you on the constituent related issue and addressing that. And I think that you can tell why it was that we wanted to host this tonight and why we feel very fortunate. And we thought it was the right decision to create this independent office with talent like Dave and Patty so that we can have this level of preparation and assistance, and to have somebody looking at it from a countywide perspective and not just a district perspective, as can happen so frequently. But there's so much interconnectedness. And one of the things that I think that Patty was kind of alluding to, I mean, fires may start in one section, they transcend very quickly, and as do floods and a lot of other natural disasters. So having a macro level look is a very important thing. But again, anybody that's on this meeting tonight or actually anybody at all that you know what couldn't attend, I'm happy to send this information over to them. And it really does mean a lot of how much of you are proactively attending tonight so that you can help prepare our greater community. And just remember, your actions might not just keep your home safe, might keep a number of your neighbors home safe as well. And so I think that it means a lot that you're here, and I appreciate that. Thank you to Dave and Patty for everything you did tonight as well.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.